Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, let's dive straight into something that honestly feels completely backward at first glance. We're looking at a deeply counterintuitive philosophical concept today. On the surface, it makes absolutely no sense, right? Like, why in the world would anyone willingly choose a harder, less fulfilling life? But as we unpack the source text, we're going to see a really profound psychological framework hiding behind this behavior. And we'll see that it's not just incredibly common, it's actually deeply wired into human nature.
To really wrap our heads around this, I want you to just think about it for a second. Have you ever felt that absolute, exhausting frustration of watching someone you love just sabotage themselves? Maybe they refuse to eat right. Maybe they procrastinate so badly they're tanking their career. Or maybe they just completely refuse to drop a toxic habit. You're sitting there watching them, thinking, why are you doing this to yourself? It's maddening. But that exact frustration perfectly sets the stage for what we're unpacking today. The text we're analyzing totally flips the script on how we look at these choices.
Our source text hits us with a stark, pretty uncomfortable reality. A lot of people actively choose their own suffering. I know, it's a total paradox, but it's true. People will willingly sit in their own mess until they get entirely sick and tired of it. It's not that they're clueless about their pain, it's more like the suffering has just become their normal baseline. They're enduring a pain of their own making, and the text stresses that this is an active, deliberate choice they are making day in and day out.
And here is where things get really intense. 0. That is literally the amount of action people typically take to fix their suffering under normal conditions. The source points out that, generally speaking, people do absolutely nothing to change their path until things escalate into a full-blown life and death situation. It takes hitting rock bottom, getting a terrifying health diagnosis, or facing a total crisis for the switch to finally flip. Up until that extreme breaking point, 0 proactive steps.
It all really comes down to a daily trade-off. We usually think of laziness and procrastination as just kicking back and relaxing, right? But the source actually frames them as a form of suffering. It's a type of suffering people actively prefer over putting in the effort to maintain basic disciplines. Having basic discipline prevents so much heartache down the line, and yet people constantly opt for the familiar sting of putting things off. Think about how wild that is. Avoiding discipline is actually a much heavier burden in the long run than just doing the hard work up front.
Instead of just looking in the mirror and dealing with reality, people build these elaborate traps out of their own self-limiting beliefs. You know the drill. It's so much easier to just say, well, this is just how I am, or I've never been good at this, instead of doing the brutal work to actually transform. They actively reject healthy lifestyle changes because, well, that means breaking out of a comfortable pattern. The trap feels safe, even while it's slowly destroying them.
And the author definitely doesn't sugarcoat this. Living an unhealthy lifestyle isn't just brushed off as a bad habit. It is literally described as dying a slow death. On the flip side, leading a vibrant, quality life strictly requires following basic healthy practices every single day. The sheer contrast here is meant to wake us up to how severe this choice really is. We aren't just talking about skipping a gym day. It is framed as a literal, daily choice between a slow decline and a genuinely quality existence.
Okay, but what about us, the people standing on the sidelines watching this happen? As observers, we have this deeply ingrained, totally natural instinct to jump in and force a change. We want to stage an intervention, lay down ultimatums, and drag our loved ones onto the right path to save them. But the source material tackles this head-on, and it basically says this instinct is completely flawed.
I'm going to pause right here because this quote is it's a gut punch. People will change only when they want to change. It is so incredibly simple, and yet we forget it all the time. The text uses this to highlight just how utterly pointless external pressure really is. You can yell, you can plead, you can bargain until you're blue in the face, but unless the spark to transform comes from inside that person, you are completely wasting your energy.
So the crucial takeaway is that any forced change is fundamentally broken from the start. It's usually completely ineffective, and even if it looks like it's working, it's going to be short-lived. Sure, someone might change their habits for a couple of weeks just to get you to stop nagging them, but it won't stick. Genuine, lasting transformation has to be an internal choice. It strictly requires the individual to actually want that change for themselves.
Which brings us to what I think is a massive paradigm shift. We have to let go of this idea that we always know what's best for everyone else. The text introduces a pretty radical concept here. A person has absolute autonomy over their own destiny, even if that destiny involves pain. It totally challenges our modern ideas about care and intervention, and it forces us to reframe suffering not as a puzzle we're supposed to solve, but as a hard boundary we have to respect.
The entire central thesis boils down to this: the sovereign right to suffer. We really have to accept that individuals have the absolute right to live exactly how they want to. Why? Because ultimately, they are the only qualified judges of their own habits and behaviors. Honestly, it doesn't matter if you think their life is terrible. It is their life. They hold a sovereign right to govern it, even if they're steering the ship straight into a brick wall.
So, what do we actually do with all this? Well, the text gives us a very clear emotional mandate as observers. Number 1, practice radical compassion for these folks. Number 2, we absolutely must not judge them. We have to completely suspend that urge to feel superior or look down on their choices. And finally, we have to respect their complete right to choose their own path. This isn't about giving up on people, it's about respecting their autonomy and offering love without demanding control in return.
Which leaves us with a genuinely tough question to chew on. I mean, it's easy to nod along to this while watching an explainer, but what about out in the real world? Can you actually replace your judgment with true radical compassion the very next time you have to watch someone choose their own suffering? It might literally be one of the hardest things a human being can do. But based on the insights we've explored today, it just might be the most respectful, realistic approach we can possibly take. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a completely new lens to look at human behavior through.